of the SEC games this weekend. There will be a lot of officials on all the fields. One guy that will not be on the field and his crew, Ken Williamson, word out yesterday from the SEC that he has been permanently suspended from officiating conference games. Yellowhammer News is the first place where I saw it. I think that's the first place that broke it. It stems from alleged multiple miscalls and grievances from the Auburn-Georgia game. Of course, that game had more light because of what happened just 7 days prior when Auburn was in Norman, Oklahoma to face the Sooners. Lots of mistakes there as well. We should make note that Ken Williamson was not on the field for that game. But the Georgia game really exasperated a lot of things, and the SEC had to do a lot as far as from a PR standpoint after the Auburn-Oklahoma game. So it was really pivotal that the Auburn-Georgia game be officiated right, and the league says no, and they took the extra step today with Williamson.
Yeah, and I feel like there's always going to be a magnifying glass on any team once, the calls may be going one-sided.
Yeah.
Obviously, the SEC released the statement after the Oklahoma game, but as everybody saw, and in my personal opinion, and we talked about it on the show after the fact, I think Jackson Arnold got it across the goal line pretty easily.
Right.
Before that was one of the calls, and then the other one was the infamous Kirby Smart clapping.
Yeah.
Running down the sidelines, even though I didn't know this was clapping. Like what are we doing there?
I've seen so many memes about that this past week when people are doing this. KD caught a timeout. KD caught a timeout on then the opening night in the NBA, and they're like, no, he was just clapping. Like, they didn't have any timeouts. It didn't result in a technical because the officials did not acknowledge the timeout, but he was doing it, and of course, it drew a lot of laughs because of what happened with Kirby Smart. But this is a really interesting situation because there were, I think, 11 files as far as just what the SEC deemed was not to the standards of officiating. Of course, the two that got the highest profile were the one that you just talked about with the timeout as well. This to me kind of puts officiating in a really interesting situation because it wasn't like Ken Williamson just got there, and it wasn't like he was new, the job was too big or whatever. He'd been in the league for a really long time, which I think makes it really interesting as the SEC moves forward, just how highly critical they will be of these officials, because these officials get performance reviews, game to game, week to week, month to month, and then year to year as well. And so I'm interested to see what Commissioner Sankey and the SEC offices do with their officials moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm not here to completely harp on the officials. I mean, it's a tough job.
For sure.
I would not want that job because, I mean, you've got 80, 90, in some places 100,000 people staring at you and booing you.
Yeah.
I would not want that as you make a call. But I thought it was really interesting when I was doing a little bit more research on Ken Williamson, and I didn't know there was an infamous call in the 2019 Fiesta Bowl where I believe it was Ohio State and Clemson.
Right.
And I think Clemson went to the national championship because Ken Williamson's crew was on that game, and there was a missed targeting call, and then there was a missed fumble, I believe. Now, I have to clarify, those were both deemed by replay review, so he doesn't really have any say in that. It's interesting that, he was linked to that, and now he's linked to this, and now he's permanently suspended from SEC games.
And you don't see this very often.
No, you don't.
And officials overall and referees in general, the good ones are the ones you don't know their names.
Yes.
That's when you know you're doing a good job, is when the officiating is clean. It's a good, clean game. Everybody, the fouls are called, and you don't know who the officials are. Obviously, in the NFL, guys like Ed Hockley and some of these other ones that have been in the game for forever. But the good ones, they hide. Yes. And this is kind of one of those big stains there on the SEC. And the SEC league offices says that obviously that they don't really publicly criticize officials. So, I mean, obviously the word came out, but there hasn't been just this boisterous attack on Ken Williamson, because the league offices also know that, fan is short for fanatic, and people get crazy, and so you don't obviously want things to get stepped outside of the white lines, so to speak. So the SEC has been kind of mum on this whole situation.
Yeah, and I think that's the right approach to it. I mean, any officials are arguably the most criticized profession in any industry. I mean, you think about most criticized professions. I mean, you've got politics you have which we'll get into here in a second. Politics, you have reffing, and then I mean literally anything else that some people might not like you, some people like you, and that's why it's so hard to be a liked official.
Yeah, and because you have to call it both ways, and fans aren't both ways.
Yes,
fans are one way, so they'll love you when
fans just
calls,
want to win.
Yes, they'll love you when the calls go your way. They'll hate you when the calls don't, and especially if those fans have money on the line. It's a very interesting seesaw scenario here. But the good officials, kind of once again shy away from that spotlight. It was really interesting to see if that's the case, or since that's the case. And because, I mean, he is a career official. He's been in the league. He's been in college football for a really long time. I'm interested to see if he gets other opportunities, and whether it's maybe the Mountain West or Division II or in another league altogether, to see if he can kind of rehabilitate his image, because obviously these things are stains that you don't want there as an official.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it is hard to come back from something like this, but I do hope he gets another chance, as you mentioned, maybe at the Division II level. I know he was a high school official for over a decade, so maybe he even goes back to high school officiating, but I think he's still going to find a job.
Yeah, and of course these white hats, I mean, that's what they're called. The head referee, the guy that makes the call, he is the white hat. He's basically the captain of the team, so to speak, the team of officials. But he's also responsible for just the way the game's officiated overall. If it's an uneven game, it unfairly kind of falls on him. Same thing with quarterback. I mean, quarterbacks are, it's wins and losses. There's so much out of the quarterback's hands. If a holder drops a hole and they miss an extra point, they don't win a football game. It goes back to the game score, and a lot of times quarterback gets the blame. So unfairly, they get the blame, and unfairly they also get the calls on the other side as well. So as far as I could tell, I don't think it's his whole crew. I think it's just him as the white hat will no longer be officiating the games in the SEC this year. So a really interesting situation there. It's an interesting scenario. And of course, with Auburn now back on the road once again, the game now goes to Fayetteville, and there will be once again a lot of eyes on this football game, because Auburn is now playing once again a team that, in my opinion, this can be a close game again. And I think the officiating, I wouldn't want it to. I hope it's not like basketball and some other sports where the pendulum swings the other way and you get a bunch of makeup calls and some phantom calls that aren't there just to help out the team. I don't think that's going to be the situation, but it will be interesting to see if how that game is officiated. If it's officiated tightly, or if it's a lot more loose, because once again you have a great offense against a very, very good defense, and how will Auburn Arkansas be officiated is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be an interesting matchup for a number of reasons, because on one side you do have a great offense going up against an elite defense, and on the other side you have a lackluster offense going up against one of the worst defenses in all of FBS. So I mean it's going to be interesting to see which side ends up prevailing. But yeah, as you mentioned, going to be keeping close eyes on the officiating there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much that's on tap for today, as we mentioned. There's so many things that are both in the sports world and outside of the sports world today. We'll talk some politics. Of course, we will dive a lot more into the Chauncey Billups, Terry Rozier story. The FBI is involved. The Italian mafia is involved. The FBI is involved in this one. Just so many things to unpack with that story. LSU looking to avoid a second straight loss. The SEC permanently banning Ken Williamson. We'll dive a little bit more into that as well. And Tom Izzo, one of Nick Saban's good friends, he is blasting the NCAA. He's been in the game for a long time, so you have to listen to what he says, but he's blasting the NCAA on a rule that it will allow G League players to play college basketball. So we will have that and so much more coming up. We will be joined by our good buddy Brian Holland once again, and as well as Noah Gross. We'll hear from him. Our favorite Maryland Terrapin, and I'll tell you what. Last week we were talking with him in the break, and our commercial breaks should be shows within themselves, just because of what we get into and the topics that we get into. But talking with Noah last week, it was hilarious, because he kind of forecasted his Maryland Terrapins once again, and saying, you want an easy win on homecoming. Here comes Maryland.
I really thought that they were going to be able to win. I think they had the game in hand.
Yeah.
And then they just found a way to lose. And I feel like there are a number of programs right now where they find new ways to lose.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about the Mets this year. They found a new way to lose every game.
Almost get creative with losing, just snatching loss from the jaws of
it
victory.
Brings entertainment value because it's like, oh, let's go. Let me watch a game today and let's see how we're going to lose today.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, okay, so what's today's storyline going to be?
Yeah, exactly.
How are we going to lose today? So it'll be really interesting to see how all of this shakes out.